Afternoon. Welcome. This is our Gullah Geechee Land and Cultural Preservation Task Force meeting, November the 7th, 2022. We're going to go ahead and officially call this meeting to order. Karen, are we in compliance with FOIA?
Yes, sir, we are.
Would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Mr. Abdul Malik?
Present.
Mr. Simmons?
Present.
Mr. Campbell?
Present.
Mr. Hens?
Present.
Ms. Wright? Present. Mr. Stevens?
Here.
And I did not hear from Ms. Green.
I had gotten a message from her earlier. She was going to try to make it, so I'm still not sure.
Thank you.
She may not be able to make it today. Okay, we do have an agenda that's before us, and I would like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda that's set before us.
I will make that motion.
Mr. Malik makes the motion.
Approved.
Ms. Wright seconds the motion. All those in favor, raise your right hand, or raise a hand. That motion carries unanimously. We have some minutes from the October 10th meeting. And if there are no revisions or questions, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes from our October 10th meeting as well.
So moved.
Mr. Malik makes the motion.
Second.
Mr. Campbell has the second. Okay, all those in favor, please show by raising your hand.
Absolutely.
That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And before we get to the next item, I did just want to have some opening comments. Certainly want to acknowledge the staff for the work that they've been doing and carrying on in the last several months in the absence of having someone in that position. So many times we have a lot of hard work for our staff to do. I just want to take a moment as we approach the end of this year to acknowledge our staff and what they do. Certainly under the leadership of Missy Lewitt, our Plan B. It's good to have people who are working on the items that we have set forth in this task force. And certainly I want to acknowledge my colleagues and for your participation in the discussions and being very thoughtful and mindful of what we're tasked to do. I want to officially welcome Ms. Joyce Wright back to our task force. It's good to have you here. And you've already given me some good energy and some good ideas, and I really appreciate that input as well. And it's along with the rest of my colleagues. Thank you for your time and attention. And certainly I do not want to leave out any of our elected officials who may be present and attend these meetings and for what they do. For some of the work that we do at this level and we're moving on to the next level, we appreciate their support as well. And of course, our public, those of you who are in the public who take the time to come out to these meetings or pay attention to them online. Are we still online with these meetings? Very good. So those of you who may be online watching, we certainly appreciate your time and attention as well. Okay, the next item I have is appearance by citizens. Do we have any appearance by citizens?
No citizens signed up, and we did not receive any comments to the portal.
Okay. Very good. Okay. The next item I have is our discussion items, and there are several. And my colleagues were very fearful of all the items we have, but I think Ms. Lewitt will be able to guide us through this effortlessly.
Okay.
Everybody has a packet, right? You do have your packets.
So this item is the critical path review. It's the same as what was in your packet in September. In the September meeting, we didn't make it through the entire slide deck or presentation. We made it through the cultural preservation progress items, as well as the heirs property progress items, and we made it through PP4 of the public policy section. What is included on the slides is the same information that's included in the larger critical path and progress tracking document that is in your packet. We could skip ahead and go through the slides that we missed in the public policy section. We have not made a lot of advancement on these items in the last several months, so the information is still the same. Again, that was included in the September packet. So I can go ahead and go through those slides. There's a lot of information. It is also the same information that was included in the report that is in your packet. So I just wanted to hear from you how you wanted to handle that. I know we have a number of other items on the agenda today as well, and I can handle this however you would like.
So at that last meeting, as Missy said, we did have a presentation of working through the slides. You guys okay if we just start from maybe that point? You do have what we did back in September in your packet. It'll give you a little more time to digest it if you're okay with that. Okay, great. Thank you, Missy.
Okay, thanks. Would we like to move to the next item then?
Yes, you can go ahead and move to the next item.
Okay. So the next item is the kind of big picture purpose statement review. This was a question that was brought up 2 months ago by Mr. Hens when we were going through the large critical path and progress tracking document, and spent about an hour going through all of that. And he asked, well, what does implementation of this plan look like? What does it feel like? And so I said we would, at our next meeting, take a look at the project purpose from this document, make sure that it still resonates with us, and talk about it. So from the report, this is the project purpose. It actually is it goes on to 2 slides. And so the purpose statement, again, for this report that we've been working for a couple years now to implement is as follows. A century ago, Hilton Head Island was dominated by the Gullah Geechee people. Because of years of geographic and social isolation, their distinct culture reflects their West African roots in many ways, including language, crafts, foodways, storytelling, traditions, farming, fishing, and relationship to the land. However, following extensive land acquisition by non-Gullah people and the construction of a bridge accessing the island in 1956, a steady trend has occurred that deteriorates the Gullah culture. Because of the alarming decrease in their percentage of population and the corresponding loss of Gullah Geechee culture, the town established the Gullah Geechee Land and Cultural Preservation Task Force in 2017. And the task force mission is to identify and assist in the preservation of the Gullah Geechee culture for the purpose of detecting and resolving issues specific to its community, including without limitation, heirs property, taxes, land use, economic, sustainability issues for an improved quality of life, and through ongoing educational programs, workshops, and seminars. Accordingly, there are 3 primary purposes for this project. Create a broad strategy for Gullah Geechee cultural preservation and to include resource preservation and enhancement, interpretation, and heritage tourism. Identify potential revisions to the land management ordinance and other land use and development related policies to better accommodate the use and development of Gullah lands. Identify tools for addressing the heirs property issues, which greatly limit what Gullah land owners can do with their land because of a lack of title to their property and related legal hurdles. So that is exactly what the purpose statement is in this document that we've been working to implement. And the way, if we were to go through the presentation and the progress tracking document, that's how the document's structured in these 3 major project categories. And they're cultural preservation, public policy, and heirs property. And really to think about that bigger picture question, what does this look like? What does the community look like and feel like if all of these things are implemented? And I have some ideas of what that would look like or feel like, but I would like to hear from from you all what you think that would look like and feel like. I know from, the short amount of time that I've been working in this space that we work to get the cultural education program through. We still have to lift that up fully, but I think that will create a better baseline understanding level for town employees and officials to just understand the culture and the history of what was here before maybe new employees have come to the island. And you have to really understand where you've been to understand where you're going. So I think that particular program is going to be really important to celebrate and acknowledge all that's come before. Also, when I look at the public policy section, certainly it is working to resolve some of the purpose that was included in this statement prior to. So we're talking about opportunities for economic development, we're talking about land preservation, and we're talking about kind of preserving the Gullah Geechee culture and land ownership. And then also as far as heirs property, there are a number of programs and initiatives that the town has already worked to put into place, and certainly that would remove some of those barriers to development or other economic opportunities or threats to those properties and ownership of those properties. So if we're able to resolve like all three of those program areas, I think you would see a really healthy, dynamic culture that's celebrated on the island and appreciated by all those that visit and live here. So that's kind of what I see it looking like if this is fully implemented. And I would like to hear from you as to, does this purpose statement in this document or how you see, what does success look like is really what I think this agenda item is for. So, and thank you, Mr. Hentz, for bringing this up. I think it's a good conversation to have.
I'm going to look to my colleagues first. I have some thoughts as well. But, yes, Mr. Hentz.
Missy, thank you very much for doing that. I've never heard the vision. You've painted the picture, and I like your vision. What's it going to look like when we're successful implementing these? And I think that for me, fairly new on this committee, it's good to have that vision painted so that when we show up for our meetings, we know now what the end game looks like. And of course, if you ask 1,000 people, you're going to get 1,000 different visions. But this is a good start, and it's so important. I mean, we've got a beautiful place we live in. We've got the ocean, trees, beautiful climate. But one of the things that makes us exceptional is the Gullah Geechee history and in the land, and we've got to really lift that up. Otherwise, we don't have the place that we have. So I really like that you gave us the overview. It makes what we're doing here in the project report more meaningful, at least to me. And maybe the only question I have is, when this was developed, what year was this prepared?
This plan is 2019.
2019. So how often do we want to take a look at the big picture and make sure, does this need to be reimagined, or is it still good 3 years later? Are we still very happy with this? Are there items that we'd want to add? Are there maybe items that we need to take off because we can't do everything? So maybe that's a task for another day. But I sure I think it's a critical mission, and I sure like that we have this committee to focus on it, to help the community with this mission.
So the report was generated, was it in, I think it's in 2018. You're talking about what the town approved in 2019?
It was approved in April of 2019, yes.
Okay, very good, okay. Others, please? Okay, well, I'll give you a minute to think about it. My comments and my observation, of course, is that this task force was created out of what some of us found to be a very disturbing trend, and that is the loss of land and the people who are part of the Gullah Geechee culture, more specifically known as Native Islanders. So while I do think we've made some great progress, again, we're working kind of at a loss at what's already happened and just trying to, put a finger in the dam, so to speak, to stop from losing everything. And that is why we were created as a task force. And I'm happy also that we reemphasized the mission and the purpose of what this task force is about. I'm sure that Missy and the staff can answer the questions in their own way. But Mr. Hintz, to answer part of that question, in my mind, that this document will always be living and breathing and changing in some form. I don't think that this task force as it is now will be in existence forever, but there will certainly be, certainly when we get someone in this position, there will be some body of oversight, and it may be directly to the Planning Commission or some other type of community group, if you will, to provide some support and some oversight to make sure that these things will continue to be implemented. As you also observed, that yes, it's a lot to do and a lot to implement. So we will keep pressing forward, and as we do, we know that sometimes the dynamics change around us in our communities, certainly with the development and other things that are certainly related to the work that we do here, the impact of what the bridge will do. Also, as we talk to our fellow residents in the community, we have situations that come up, and the more we work, the more we do on it, the more we learn just how much work there is to do. It's hard to kind of put it all into, say, one document and say, this is it, and this is the answer, and this is all we got to do to fix this. But I think it's a very good question. I'm hoping that maybe one day we will be able to accomplish everything that's in this, in our recommendations. Again, however, I think that it will be work that will continue to be ongoing. And yes, there have been some other organizations that have helped with some of the items that I'm familiar with. Heritage Library, of course, Ms. Linda Pickett is here. And organizations like that, and certainly Low Country Gullah has helped with identifying heirs property and helping with some of the taxes that are due. So we have some citizens in the community that are working to help move some of these things along as well. What I'm hoping that the message will be to our community is that, yes, we are making some progress. Are we there yet? No, we're not there yet. I've talked to a couple of people just last week, and they were asking about what they could do with their property, and I informed them that we do have the design studio in place now, and so we have a place that we can go. And as we continue to build those bridges and mend those fences, because you will see in this report also, one of the things that we're trying to overcome is that relationship with the town and some of the mistrust and misinformation that is out there. So that's why I want to stand the staff up and commend the town on their efforts. And at the same time, we definitely want to be able to hold them accountable to try to get some of these items addressed. Other thoughts?
Yes, sir, I have a thought. One of my thoughts would be, and first of all, I want to say too, I appreciate the work that has been being put into the presentation you've been given, because not every month we come, we get a nice thick pile of stuff to go through, so I appreciate that. So, now, one of the things that I would like to see emphasized is a healthy business community. I can remember when I first came to Hilton Head several years back, the first business, the first thing that you saw on Hilton Head were businesses that were owned by Gullah families. So I don't know if we passed the point of no return in that regard, but I certainly think that if we are talking to landowners now about potential land use, then I think one of those crucial questions should be, are you interested in seeing ways that you can benefit economically from your land? Because I know that historically, everything that we did was tied to economics. You know, the fish that we put out of water, it wasn't just for personal consumption. Once we had satisfied our personal consumption, everything else was sold. And the same with the farming, and if a person had a trade, you know, it was all connected to economics. Because without the economics, we certainly wouldn't be able to stay on the island at any point in time. So I would just like to, I would hope to see that emphasized.
Okay, thank you. That's right. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Missy, for what you're doing and preparing us for the meeting. There were a couple of things that I would like to identify and going over where we have the cultural preservation. I know that the town has been involved in regards to making sure that people are educated about the culture and the history, and I would like to say thank you for that. But I hope that's on a continuous basis. I hope it's not something that we see immediately right now and then it's gone in 6 months. So if we have it on a continuous cycle, I think that is very important. And not only with here at the town with the staff, but I think there are other projects and programs that we need to engage with, you know, with the chamber and others, that we need to definitely educate them about the culture and the history of the island. The public policies, the economic development piece of this, I think, if possible, that we can visit with that. The importance of when we are implementing projects or developments are coming to the town, that we are all inclusive, okay? It's not just on the south end, at the north end of the island. It has to be island-wide, and I think that is important. We sometimes don't always do that, so I think that we have to be very mindful in making sure that we have a voice in the development, whether or not it's north or south, but it has to be inclusive. And the heirs property, you're doing a great job by that. It's not too much more that we can do other than just inform people, and hopefully that we can definitely continue to work on that. Vision is always evolving, so it's a possibility that we can revisit that again in a year or two, but you know, we can't just stay stifled in one area and just say this is it, we're not going to do anything else, but it all depends upon what is happening around us, and so we need to be mindful and open-minded about that. As we grow, as the island grow, we have to grow with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll add
Sure.
a couple of quick comments. I think the statement, of course, you know, as we've said, we definitely take our hats off to all the work that the staff and Missy yourself have been doing. And I think the statement really tells of the great disconnect that is taking place between the Gullah community and all of development, government, and all that is happened and why we were established to start with. It's just been that great disconnect between the Gullah community and development, tourism. So as a result of that, all of what we were accustomed to, I think, is what the statement really says. And I'm trying to bring that, make a connection between the culture, and one of the key elements is that the culture has always been tied to the land. You know, the culture is tied to the land. And as the land had began to fade is where it began to create issues for the community. And that's why so much that's tied to the land and the development of land, the retaining of land is always the focal point of what we're trying to accomplish. Because the culture itself is always been and will continue to be tied to the land. You know, we talk about all of this, it all ties to what you can or cannot do or what's happening with the land. So I think the statement tells of the disconnect and it tells of the work and the direction in which we, excuse me, in which we are headed. Obviously, as we said, there's a lot here, a whole lot. There's been a lot that has been accomplished, and there's still a lot of work yet to be done, but I think we're definitely headed in the right direction. I think if our focus stays with what the land brings into the equation, then I think we'll find that we can move what the economics, the social side of it, the quality of life, that the land has always brought and will continue to bring, if these things are accomplished and we can better use that which we have remaining. It's always the hurdles, as I think the last part of this really says, that, we have to jump when it's time to do something. And one of the biggest concerns I have is it seems like when there's a bit of accomplishment, there's something else that twists and turn and go the other way. Just when you think you've made it to a point, we find that there's something else that you thought we have done. So I'm not sure where we get to a point where we can really point our fingers and say, okay, we got it. And that's, I think, is the end point of where we want to be. I mentioned some folks earlier today about kicking the can down the road on some things. It gets to a point where you have to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is where we are. What's next? Not just every time we get to a point, you say, okay, let's kick the can a little further and we'll pick it up somewhere else. Well, eventually you're going to leave some things undone because you keep kicking the can to those things that will come up that you need to get done. So that's just my spiel of how I see where we are as it's tied to the statement and what it really tells. It tells of what the Gullah community has come from and basically tells where we are. So that's where I see us currently, and that's where I see us going and see some of the things that we have done. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Others?
No,
You good?
I'm good.
Welcome, Shawnee. I'm glad you can make it. Babysitter show up today? Oh, yes. Okay, great. I was going to ask if I have anyone from the public that would like to comment. Councilman Brown?
Just based on some of the comments that have been made, I would suggest, if you are going to be reviewing this purpose statement, we've talked a lot from the beginning about how we measure, and I think that's important. And at the current moment, we don't have a metric, so to speak, to show our success or not, right? And I would hate for that to only be judged by emotions or the good or the bad that happens on a daily basis, as Mr. Simmons was describing. I know that one of the exercises that was done very early on was identifying all of the Gullah-owned properties and then figure out the amount of acreage that was in place at the time. I think that study was done back in 2017, 18 maybe, but we've got a baseline that goes back to mid-90s with the RUDAT study that talked about 3,500 acres, okay? So the question that I'm recommending that this group ask is, where are we now? And are we holding, okay? And you're probably right, we're probably not gonna turn the tide and start to add to that, but no more loss, I think, is really the mission at hand. But we don't know that at the moment. I think it's an important metric for us to have, particularly since we have turnover, that new people coming on to boards and commissions, new people coming on the staff, new people coming on the council. That constant baseline and metric, I think, is important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Bryan. Are there others in the public who would like to comment? Okay, great. Thank you, Missy. You can continue.
Okay. All right. So the next item is the update on the Historic Districts overlay. And that's, again, a standing agenda item that is always on our agenda. Last month, you heard from the consultants regarding the Mid-Island District Plan, and last week, that district plan was adopted by council. It doesn't mean that the recommendations in the plan are on the books just yet, but that the guiding document or plan is adopted, and we will work to implement those recommendations from the plan. So part of what I wanted to go over and what's on the screen, the memo that was in your packet outlined the comparison between what was recommended in the Mid-Island District Plan in those 5 historic neighborhoods against what was recommended in the Gullah Geechee Cultural Preservation Project Report. And so this comparison just shows, because again, the Gullah Geechee report was recommending an overlay district. The Mid-Island District Plan is recommending that these changes are made through base zoning. So no overlay district, but that they consistently applied for the 5 historic neighborhood sites that also are currently zoned RM4. So if you compare the two, there was higher density that was recommended in the Cultural Preservation Report, and there's between 6 and 8 dwelling units per acre recommended in the Mid-Island District Plan. Item B in the Gullah Geechee Cultural Preservation Report recommends setback and buffer requirements being relaxed a little, also consistent uniform density standards, as well as setback, buffer, and open space requirement reductions would be looked at in the Mid-Island District Plan as well. And then also they were looking at maximization of development potential. And in the Mid-Island District Plan, we're looking at the allowance of neighborhood commercial, so that allows economic opportunity for these particular neighborhoods, and that mix would be 75% residential and 25% neighborhood commercial. So these are smaller scale neighborhood commercial opportunities is what was recommended in the report, but more opportunity than just an at-home occupation. So not a full commercial enterprise, neighborhood commercial scale, but a little bit more commercial than just an at-home occupation is what that plan envisioned. So I just wanted to, again, go over what was just adopted in Mid-Island District. Again, that's 5 particular neighborhoods, and I have the slide here. So the historic neighborhoods are outlined in orange. It's Bagall, Mitchellville, Big Hill, Grassland, and Marshland areas where these new Mid-Island District plans recommendations will be implemented. And again, this shows a little bit of a flavor of what the plan was recommending. So additional density proposed, so there could be some infill opportunities. Here it shows a community garden as possibly that neighborhood commercial opportunity, but gives you an idea of a more a denser residential network, and also shows what uniform density standards could look like should development follow this particular image. So I wanted to make sure, since you had the opportunity to hear from the consultants last month, and then the district plan was just adopted, that you understand how these recommendations in the district plan help to implement what is here in the Gullah Geechee Culture Preservation Project Report.
You had mentioned the historic neighborhoods. If you could maybe just give us a more general description of some of the areas where this development is proposed.
Sure. So the The red dashed outline is the full district boundary. So the Mid-Island District itself is a rather large area that goes south all the way to the Marshland neighborhood, in and around the Ashmore Tract, of course, around the Mid-Island Tract, which is going to be the centerpiece, the town park site, that 103-acre park. And it goes all the way up to the ocean. So we've got historic Mitchellville is included, Bagall neighborhood, in and around the airport, and around those commercial shopping center areas in the middle. But that's the district boundary in full. And within that larger district boundary, there are 5 historic neighborhoods. And those historic neighborhoods are where this development, these development recommendations are going to be taking place.
Yes, sir. You have a question?
Yeah, 2 questions. One is on that artist rendering of what a neighborhood could look like with the increased densities. It can never look like that with heirs property because you couldn't build structure like that on heirs property, right? You just couldn't get a mortgage if it's widely held and you can't get a mortgage.
There could be opportunities for that to look a little different with manufactured homes, but certainly the infill opportunity is there at a consistent density pattern. And you're right. The plan shows or proposes also that we would develop a small house series. So there would be pre-vetted and pre-approved house plans for use if somebody was able to finance the project, even without a mortgage, if it was heirs property. That there could be other housing options than just a mobile home development.
Okay. And then my second question is again, I was thinking about it last time we met, the 75-25 split. Mm-hmm. And that's easy for us to say, but it seems like that ought to be a neighborhood by neighborhood that ought to be established neighborhood by neighborhood, because maybe some neighborhoods want that 25%, and maybe some neighborhoods want it more residential. How would we know? And how could you set a standard for all of our 14 communities? It seems to me that it would be better if those communities establish what they would like to see for their neighborhoods.
And that is, I mean, again, it was recommended in this plan to be a 75-25% split among residential and neighborhood commercial, and that is what it is, a recommendation. So we'll have to go through the process to amend the code to both allow the additional density and the neighborhood commercial as a use. And as we go through that process, not only does, if the zoning district changes, which it likely will go from RM4 to RM6 or 8, if depending on where we land, that requires a rezoning of properties as well. So there's quite a bit of process that has to unfold. And as we do that, we will look to further refine the recommendations and calibrate and make sure that they make sense in all the areas that they're being proposed.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to wait till you finish, but I'm not entirely sure, and I think you answered that in part, Missy, about heirs property not being able to be developed. I think there have been some circumstances, certainly when the town has acquired property, that they've been able to figure out how to do some development on properties that might have been considered heirs property. That's something we talked about early on when we start developing these recommendations. And there's still, as we said, a lot of work to be done. It may even be at a state level, but I'm hoping that the town and this task force can be an advocate for getting some clarity on exactly what can happen with heirs property. And I'm sure we all live for the day where we reduce the amount of heirs property that we have.
We can certainly add that to a future agenda, and talk about what development opportunities are available on heirs property. Certainly some of the barriers are removed if the title is cleared, but we can have some experts talk about that as well.
Okay, thank you.
You said how many communities is left in the overlay that you're talking about right here, 5?
Yes, this particular Mid-Island district includes 5 historic neighborhoods.
In those 5 historic neighborhoods, like, do we have like some idea of the Gullah families that are there? It's just that when I look at the overlay district that we're dealing with now, being born and raised, it's like, I don't know that there are a lot of Gullah families that live in this particular area scope. So I'm just, I guess, I have a hard time of, from what we talked about and the overlay of the Gullah communities, how did we get to this area right here that looks to me, yes, I see the benefit of the park and, you know, things that will happen there, but then you still have the airport, that you have Gullah communities that are already impacted on how that will impact their property. Not only do you have those families and those in that community that's impacted to it around there, I'm just trying to see the benefit of, I want to hear the true benefits of this. And what brought me to saying it is because when I hear you, like he said, with Eric's property, and I brought it up in the last meeting, when you show the picture of the homes and stuff, let's be real, that's not what the Gullah communities right now look like. So to get to that point, and I heard you say there could be a model of some little, I guess you said like little homes or whatever. I don't know where I am. I have a hard time with things like that and statements like that when we're trying to come together and build that gap of the island, the one island. And to keep saying, looking at stuff for the future, Mr. Brown mentioned the RUDAC study. Now here we are years later with the Gullah Task Force. Like, how long are we gonna talk about the future of the scope of these things when right here, right now, as it's hot and we're talking about bridging this gap, how long will this take to get to the communities that are really sitting there like that want to benefit from it? For instance, I live in the Stony area. So of course, with everything that's happened through my family and experience and families around, like, I got several calls like, okay, what are they saying? What are we doing? Whatever. And then to come back and be like, okay, well now the overlay's over here. Well, when is it coming to us? And I just said, in the future. So again, like, I don't know. I'm just looking for more, when are we gonna deal with it and move forward to the now?
Sure.
Like, because the time that it's going to take to do the overlay for us to see the benefit, I'm trying to figure out how many Gullah families and everything right here will just benefit on this part for it to be a large enough example for the other areas on the island. Because while we're like making that impact on them of what we've done, which we are doing great things and partnering with the town, we are doing great things, but just like we're thinking, okay, how long, they are too.
Sure. So this is not an overlay district. It's a redevelopment district area. Sorry about that. And the area would achieve all of the regulation and zoning changes through making base zoning changes. And so we were looking at doing more district planning in other areas of the island. So to replicate, what works with the district center that's proposed here, what works with the historic neighborhoods here, and then as we move to other areas of the island, we would replicate those recommendations. And we also have an island-wide growth framework and master planning process on the horizon. We could look to see how this is going with implementation and look to weave in additional recommendations within that process. Again, just like what was proposed in this plan with the overlay, it still required a large-scale, rezoning of a lot of properties to enact what was proposed here as an overlay district. So a lot of process, public hearings are required through the process that was outlined in this plan as well. It's the same amount of, red tape and process that's required with this. It requires first rolling out a future land use map, which requires us to amend our comprehensive plan to adopt the Mid-Island future land use map. And then we can work through an implementation plan to implement the recommendations that were called out. Certainly, we could look on, to create implementation schedules that, advances, say, the historic neighborhood recommendations before some of the others, but certainly that's the process. And no, you're right, it's not for all 14 of the historic neighborhoods. It is for these 5. So I understand that.
Yeah, let me see if I can help a little bit. And I appreciate Ms. Green bringing those points out, because what I hear her expressing is the history as we know it. And again, as it was stated in that mission statement or purpose, a very disturbing trend. There have been some things that have already happened that have already happened. That is why our community, a lot of times, like Ms. Green is saying, we're asking questions, what's happening now? But a couple things. Yeah, this is the Mid-Island District Plan. I think we're starting to have some discussions to move away from what we know as an overlay district. We may still look at it like that, but I think what was mentioned earlier, we start maybe looking at things as base zoning. The other comments that I heard, I think, are also appropriate, that looking at the different neighborhoods and even almost property to property, case by case, because a lot of the properties are very unique and have unique dynamics in different neighborhoods. I think there's a couple things that is going to help, of course, and when we get someone filled in this position, they can really be focused on this particular work, not that the staff is not doing it, but if we have someone in that position, then that's someone we hope will connect with the community, so that when we have those folks asking the question, we can put a face with that person and ask them directly, or they can come and inform us for sure. We're doing a pretty good job as far as communication and getting it out there, but it would be nice to have someone we know that's in that position. The last thing is the Community Development Corporation that's been discussed too. That's going to be coming online. It's been approved by the town council, and that particular organization is really going to help with a lot of what's going on here now. We here at the task force, and certainly in our community, will continue to have some very strong input. And I just share this because I know that the input that we have, that we just heard, is coming from a place where, again, we have some history that is not always good history. So we continue to ask those questions, and we're very concerned about development and what happens in our historic neighborhoods. Yes, sir.
If I may, I think I do have a question that I'm a little cloudy about as well. With the adoption of these Mid-Island district planning, and I understand the implementation process will take some time, but if once this is fully adopted, can this not be used as a template for the other neighborhoods that have not received that increase, or those things that were itemized here?
That's correct. That is our intent, that this is used as a template to replicate in other historic neighborhoods as we roll out additional district plans or through the island-wide planning exercise that's coming up.
And I guess my follow-up question to that would be, with this as a template, to move forward with it, would it be necessary to go through that whole process of having consultants for every little neighborhood?
And I don't believe so. I think we would do the community outreach and stakeholder meetings to make sure that all of those are consistent throughout. But now, if we have a plan and an implementation schedule that appears to work in a, replicative fashion, then we will look to do
The process
that.
can be duplicated
That's
much
correct.
faster.
Faster, yes,
Okay.
much faster.
Other questions? Anyone from the public? Comments or question? Yes, sir, Mr. Campbell.
Not a question, but just comments, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Chair and members of the task force, let me just say I just came in a little bit late and I probably missed most of the presentation, but I can get the drift as to what's being proposed and what's being considered, and I think that it's a step in the right direction to come up with a template of some kind. Thomas said that, and I made a note of it, it's not a cookie cutter approach. So every cookie cutter is not going to fit every neighborhood, as we know. So I think it's important, what you said, Mr. Chair, is that it has to be ratcheted down into each neighborhood, wherein one is responsible for getting with those various families, because every family is different, every amount of years property is going to be different, and different people are going to want different things with their property. I think it's going to be the grassroots approach is going to be very, very critical to coming up with a plan for the neighborhoods. If you ride through the neighborhoods now, the neighborhoods are not really neighborhoods anymore. They're just parcels of neighborhoods, more so than just a distinct neighborhood where we can say that all the property in this neighborhood is Gullah-owned property. The other thing that was mentioned was that the 75-25 split, I think that would be better if it says up to 75 and up to 25, or whatever that number is for, the maximum number as far as the split between commercial versus residential. Those numbers we should have some flexibility with those numbers when you write those numbers. The base zoning idea is a good idea, I think, and I think that that's the only way you're going to be able to distinctly or definitively work with each neighborhood in its own setting more so than anything else. The Chaplin neighborhood is not going to be like the Spanish Wells neighborhood. You can't just match those two neighborhoods. Spanish Wells is completely different. Spanish Wells is going to be a special neighborhood because that's the best neighborhood of these Gullah neighborhoods. But certainly we're looking, you see what I'm saying, right? But that's going to be a challenge, and I think it behooves us, the task force and all of us living in these neighborhoods, to really get with families and make that difference as far as what we want or what we foresee our families will want in these neighborhoods. I think that Mrs. Presentation is basically from her professional point of view, and we need to make sure that we know what we want personally personally to be done, or how we want personally to utilize our property with the respect for our neighbors and respect for the whole history of our neighborhoods. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. And for the record, where do you live, Mr. Campbell? In which historic neighborhood do you live in?
The best.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have a question or comment?
I'd like to spin off just a little bit. And I guess Mr. Campbell got up right before I was going to suggest, we talk about the Mid-Island plan, I guess it's either against or versus the plan from the task force side of it. And, the question always comes up about the separate of the neighborhoods and how they each are different. And Mr. Campbell, like myself, we live in the best neighborhood, of course. So we know that it'll be different when it comes to the Spanish Wells area. Just the dynamics of the property itself would be different. And of course, I agree with him, and it's going to say as well, the 75-25 is not a bad idea. But if it says up to, it gives you far greater flexibility. I think that approach is not bad. But even though I like to think the neighborhoods all basically need the same thing, that need is going to arise in a different form, some kind of way. We're all going to need roads, we're going to need water, we're going to need sewer. They all need that. The approach after you get that is where you would go, and that's why you'll need some flexibility. But I think the idea of the Mid-Island Plan being a template, I suppose that could work, and I suppose it's not a bad idea. It does give us that added boost for the other neighborhoods? Does it really give us that? So when that is done, we can look forward to something not being as long of a process, because we know this process as it is going to take some time. And for the other neighborhoods that have to bounce back or come back and then go through that same process for the same thing is where the real uneasiness comes. Because we're wondering, are we getting left behind and have to go through the same year-long plus process to get what we already know we need. So I think if it's done with the flexibility, done with the other neighborhoods in mind, then it could be a good approach. You have to have some foundation to build on, and if the Mid-Island, you compare the two, gives you that foundation, then I think we're headed in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simmons. If no one else has any questions or comments, Missy, I'll ask you to continue.
Well, that concludes my update on this particular item. And next we have April Atkins, who's going to talk about pop-up shops.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today to present to you. Missy Luke invited me in to talk to you about pop-up events and special events related to business licensing. My name is April Akins, and I am the Revenue Services Manager here at the Town of Hilton Head. I oversee the administration of business license taxes, other local taxes such as hospitality taxes, accommodation taxes, and beach preservation fees. So I just wanted to go over the pop-up shops in a larger, broad view, and then we can kind of drill down to the business license stuff. They are interrelated. And if you have any questions, I'm obviously available now or even after the presentation. So as you're aware, the town has a special event ordinance. And it was adopted to assist our community in providing and coordinating events for the public by ensuring events are both safe and meet the basic needs of the participants. All events, large or small, are considered a special event under this ordinance. There are all types of special events. I went through and listed some that we deal with every day here in the town. And again, they're large or small. So we have, of course, our festival events, our parades, marches and protest markets, which include farmers markets, art markets, ongoing markets, or even a market that may just happen through the weekend. We have pop-up shops, weddings, outdoor concerts, tournaments, sporting events. The list can go on, but I think you get the drift here. So when you are organizing a special event, it's important that you work with town staff to ensure that you are going through the permitting and regulations that need to be considered when planning a special event. We do have a town special event staff here to help guide you through the process. It can be a little complicated, I'm not going to lie. But the town's special event coordinator here at the town acts as the liaison to the various departments that may be involved with your event. And if you have not met her, her name is Eileen Buckaloo. So most special events have an event producer, or what's also known as an event sponsor. An event sponsors are defined as someone that promotes or coordinates a special event. The event producer works with the town's special event coordinator to ensure that the event has met all town requirements and/or state requirements and approvals prior to the occurrence of the event. And the event producer is required to obtain a town business license. I focus mostly on small events because I know pop-up events typically are smaller. There's a lot that goes on with larger events, so I tried to pare it down to our small events or simple events, and that would be defined with the following criteria. The event would have less than 250 participants, and that usually is the key point on whether it's a large event or a small event. There's no building permits that are required, no alcohol sales, and no road closures would occur. Small events do not require a special event permit from the town, but will need to meet other requirements necessary for the event. Some of the additional requirements that need to be considered when planning an event are listed here on the screen. The town special event coordinator can work with you to help obtain any permitting, licensing, or approvals from town departments and/or state agencies. The event location needs to be reviewed for zoning. If you have alcohol, beer, or wine sales, you'll need to make sure that you have the appropriate alcohol beverage licensing from the Department of Revenue. A stage or a tent may also require permitting and inspections from like our fire department. Music and entertainment, most of those require a town business license. If you are going to have open burn, which means you have open flame cooking, or you've got food warming stations with the Bunsen burners and that sort of thing, the fire department would definitely want to be involved. The music and entertainment piece, I'm just going to go back to that. That mostly is for, if you're looking for permitting, the fire department wants to know if there's an electrical connection and make sure that the fire is safe, that there's fire safety. Vendors are obviously artists, musicians, people who are selling any type of food, beverage, merchandise, retailers, that sort of thing. And we'll get a little further into those requirements in the next couple of slides. Amusement rides are regulated by the state. There's bleachers, firework displays. There's all sorts of items that do require additional permitting, typically by the state and the town as well. I know we've been here for a while today, so I can move through this quickly if you prefer. There's a lot to cover in these small events. The main purpose of our ordinance is to make sure public safety is met, and that is so the event requirements are designed to ensure safe and enjoyable events for participants, spectators, and the community. The event producer will need to consider the following when planning an event: available restrooms and toilets, available trash and recycling receptacles, if applicable, available parking, impact of increased traffic on the area, crowd control and/or safety, noise, and then after event cleanup. So I wanted to visit the vendor business license requirements for small events. I've tried to make it easy. It's not always easy in the business license world. So any business that has regular business operations will definitely require a town business license, and that is regular business operations within the town of Hilton Head. Regular business activities are defined as more than 2 sale periods of more than 3 days per year. So if the vendor does not meet these regular business activity requirements, then the vendor should apply for a business license to get the annual license, but they would be exempt from paying the tax. Vendors selling food and beverages. All food trucks and mobile food units require a town business license, even if they will only participate at one event. Additional operational permits are required from the town's fire department for these types of businesses, in addition to state regulations and permits. So that is the reason why they are required to have a business license. All vendors selling prepared food and beverage is required to collect and remit the town's hospitality tax. I included this in the presentation. I think it's important for everyone to understand that we do have a local business license, local industry business license that's in our town code. And it states, any person who desire to exclusively engage in business of offering for public sale at designated locations as determined by the town manager, farm and garden products or flowers grown on the property of such person, flower arrangements, arts, or crafts produced in the home of such person, or seafood caught by such person shall secure from the town an annual business license, but again will be exempt from paying the business license taxes. Of course, there's my information. Please take it down. So you can give me a call or send me an email if you have any questions. But I want you to know that I'm happy to be your point of contact at all times. My job is to get you licensed so that you can flourish and have a very good business economy. I think that was the word you used, healthy business. So I'm definitely here to help. We have other resources as well. We have this great user-friendly tool on the website. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, on how to help plan a special event. So I'm going to pull that up and show it to you. We obviously have our special event coordinator that helps work as a liaison with all of the departments that may have to get involved. And then we also have the town has a special event page that has all sorts of information on it. But I really thought that I could show you the friendly tool because I found it to be very friendly. I use it a lot. Okay, so you're probably familiar with our landing page here at the town on our website. And if you scroll down, permits and licensing, and then if you just keep going down, there's a space here for our special events. And this can help you navigate through planning your special event. My place that I really liked, that I found, was under organizing a special event. So it'll go through how to organize what is considered a special event and that sort of thing. But it's this guide here that I thought was very helpful. I use this a lot. So there's actually a checklist of items here on the left-hand side, and depending on what your event is doing, you would just click on it to find out what else is required. So it provides a checklist. So in this particular case, if you had less than 250 participants, you're not required to get a special event, but you may have other items that are required based on the boxes that you're checking. You can go through location, you can do event specifics. So if you knew you were going to serve alcohol, it will be up here, sorry. Then it can tell you what's required for that. As an example, if you were going to put a stage up, you kind of get my drift here. But it does a checklist for you so that you can start following some of the outline procedures. I just thought this was very helpful. Again, I use it a lot when I'm speaking with people over the phone so that I know that I'm giving them the proper information. Our town staff has been working behind the scenes, reviewing the special event policies and procedures, practices, and our ordinance. We really are trying to make this a little more streamlined and friendlier because it can get pretty complicated the larger the event happens. Angie Stone has been working on that this year. And again, that goes across numerous departments here at the town. So just know that we've been working on that, and we're always open for suggestions and recommendations, because we understand this can be a lot for anyone. And that, honestly, that's it for my presentation. I just can take questions if you want.
I have a question.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Akins. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Green, you have a question?
That's her mic on.
Yeah, it is. So pop-up shop is now added to it, added to the list?
So pop-up shops have always been considered a special event and within our ordinance. That's not new.
Okay, because I just remember talking about it, and no one seemed to at one point know what we were talking about when we said a pop-up shop. And then can you just kind of reiterate about with a pop-up shop, about needing a license?
Yes. So the event coordinator, sponsor, or producer would need to obtain a business license. They're the ones organizing the event, and a lot of times are charging fees to the vendors and setting everything up, right? So you have that piece of it. And then obviously the vendors, depending on what they're doing, would need to obtain a business license as well. And then the location of the event would also need, just need to make sure that it's zoned for that type of activity. And then, of course, depending on what you're doing at the event, you may have some other items.
Okay, so the person that's, say is the host, they need a business license.
Yes,
And each vendor?
So the vendors, again,
Hold on, 1 second. I
Let's
wasn't
go back.
finished. Excuse me. So I'm at this, I'm wanting to be at this pop-up shop. I'm selling used items. My booth selling used items. I need a business license for that?
so if you're doing regular business on the island, you would need one. And again, that is more than 2 sale periods of more than 3 days per year. And that's actually a state regulation that it falls into our local town ordinance. That's the definition of regular business operations. If you don't fall into regular business activities, then you would need to apply for the license. So you have it to operate as a vendor, but you would not have to pay the tax. So you would be exempt from the tax. Does that make sense?
And how much are the business licenses?
They vary, but it typically runs somewhere between $40 and $65 a year
For the year? That's
for the entire year.
I'm sorry, were you finished?
Go ahead.
I got a question. So, I don't know, you
Turn your
remember,
mic on, please.
yeah. You remember years ago, the Island Packet used to do a big yard sale event at the high school?
Cool.
And they used to have, I want to say about 200 or 300 vendors. So every vendor would have to get a business license, am I correct?
Okay, so in that particular event, that's actually falls under the large event, so that would be over 250 participants. The vendors that are there, again, if they're not doing regular business operations, then they get a special license to operate just for that one day. But that's in a different, that's if you're having over 250 participants, so a little different.
Okay, so you said each of those vendors would get a special license? And when did that start?
That's always been in the ordinance. So instead of having an annual license, a lot of those folks that you talk about are just there for the weekend to sell, you know, what their items from their home. So that doesn't fall in the regular business activities. Because of that, they are not required to submit for an annual business license. They don't intend on operating again. So those vendors are a little different than the vendors that are coming in a few times a year that may travel around our area and they do other markets. So that it's a little different.
I guess what I'm asking is, you said each vendor at that event, let's stick to where he is, would need a special license?
They do. They obtain that through the sponsor.
Okay, because I guess I'm asking because I've been one of those vendors and I've never had to do so.
So
All I had to
right.
do is fill out a paper that I was going
to
for my
sponsor.
tent, that I was going to be there and pay a fee, which is why I'm really trying to find the balance. And now with the pop-up shops and what we've been known to have around in the areas.
So in the event that you're speaking of, the sponsor is responsible for making sure the vendors have either the correct business license or the special license that we talked about. They do not have the vendor do that themselves. It's the sponsor's requirement and responsibility to make sure that the vendors are licensed properly. So behind the scenes, they're working with town staff and submitting a report, if you will, of the vendors that will be at that event participating, and then based on the needs there, town staff works with the sponsor directly. So that's where maybe you weren't aware that that was happening behind the scenes, but that has been the process for many years.
And I guess it bothers me, not that I wasn't aware, but the fact that it wasn't brought up, it wasn't in the paperwork or anything, and now when the questions are coming up about pop-up shops, now it's like put in place, this is what we do, X, Y, Z, when, as far as I know, it hadn't been a process that was followed.
Okay, yeah, I apologize if you weren't aware of the process. It is
Made
obviously
aware.
something that we are working on to educate the public. As I said, our town staff's been working to try to make it a little easier and putting the information on the website so that you are aware that that is considered a special event, and not just a business for the day. It's very different in our town ordinance. But I've been here for almost 14 years, and that has been the practice the 14 years I've been here.
So on those big events that sponsor is responsible for making sure that the vendors have their license. Now, is that sponsor required to submit a list of those vendors to the town?
Yes, sir, that
With
is actually on
payment?
the application.
Okay, with payment for their space or just their name?
They typically provide their name, their business, like a contact information. So the business name, a contact name, and phone number.
Okay, but the only financial responsibility that the sponsor has is for his own licensing.
Yes, he gets his license or she gets her license.
Okay.
And then as part of planning the event, they are responsible to make sure the vendors are licensed as well.
Now, another question on that same scenario. The sponsor has done his work as far as the town can see. Let's say the town finds out that someone at the event doesn't have their license. Whose responsibility is that?
At that point, I would probably reach out to them after the event and ask them, how often are you operating? Do you need a license? And just kind of educate them that, going forward, they might need a license, and it would just depend on the situation.
The vendor or the sponsor?
I would reach out directly to the vendor.
To the vendor, okay.
Yeah.
I guess this is my last question. If I want to do a yard sale, do I have to have a business license for that?
A yard sale at your personal residence?
Yes, ma'am.
No.
And I can do that every week if I wish, without a license?
You can, you know what, I probably shouldn't answer questions about yard sales. That's not really in my zone, if you will.
Okay.
But if you were hosting a yard sale at your house for a day or two, that typically does not require
So
a business
in other
license.
words, everybody in my neighborhood could have a yard sale on a particular day if they wanted to, without a license.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
And again, depending on the scale, if you're going to have a huge yard sale that's a neighborhood activity and it may impact traffic or that sort of thing, you certainly would want to reach out to the town to make sure, that
you're
we're
aware.
aware of it in case you need some assistance with,
Okay.
the sheriff's office for crowd control and that sort of thing.
But we can take those homes and just bring them to one site and have a community neighborhood yard sale in one location. Can we do that?
If you were going to have an event like that and it was less than 250 participants, then you would just follow the guidelines that we just went through. And again, if you're going to sponsor something of that nature, then normally you would have to have a business license. So, like the school, the Island Packet, those are sponsors of very large events. If you're dealing with a small event, then that, unfortunately, they're not exactly, apples to apples.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry. Ms. Wright, you have a question or a comment?
I do.
Yes.
I have a comment and a question. I would like to say thank you to this town for supporting events that I've been a part of and learn something new every year. Things pop up. And I really do appreciate what you guys have guided us through with this. We do a very large event, and so we are responsible for quite a few vendors that we have to deal with. And, it's always that communication of whether or not they have a business license or a license to do what they're doing. I am concerned about the pop-up again, because as Shauna was saying, Ms. Green was saying that, a lot of this did not surface until now that the pop-ups are coming up. And I just went online to kind of define what a pop-up shop is, just to make sure that I am, asking the right question with this. And basically, if someone have a pop-up shop down in Mitchellville and they're there for more than 2 to 3 days, then they are required to have a license to do their business, correct?
2 to 3 days, is that, you're wanting to know if the vendor needs a business license? Again, yeah, if they're falling into regular business operations, they would certainly need a business license.
But if there's someone that's coming just for a one-night event?
Then they would fall into the not meeting regular business activity. They should apply to have one, so they're covered for any event that they participate in throughout the year. But again, they would be exempt from the tax.
If someone lives on Hilton Head, someone lives in Bluffton, what's the difference with that?
Well, there is a difference. Typically, to keep it, try to keep it easier, the requirement's the same, but the tax is twice as much outside of our jurisdiction. So their fee would be higher, their tax.
So anyone out of the Hilton Head island would be different?
The tax would be lower,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, that is the tax, how the tax code is written across the state.
Last question. Because I have quite a few around this area, because it's a very touch and go spot for me with the events.
I'm really here to help, I promise.
And dealing with these events that we've done in the past and the ones that I've attended, who is actually monitoring the events to do as what we talked about and having the metrics behind who is on target and who is not on target, who is penalized, who isn't, what is, what happens to the person who is out of order?
Well, we have, like I said, it starts with the application process by reaching out to Eileen Buckaloo. And she's going to determine if you need to go through the formal application process, which is over $250, and that is a very, as you know, can be a very strenuous event planning. And that piece is definitely monitored by Eileen and then additional town staff across the organization. So once we receive that application, the information is sent out to all the departments that need to be involved in that process. And then everybody takes their responsibility, so my team looks at the business licensing, the fire department would start looking at, and so on. So that is, once everything is completed and approved and signed off on, then your event application is approved and we move on and hopefully have a successful event.
Who is responsible for that as an individual? Do you actually go out and monitor people at these events with that or no?
So I know our process internally has been evolving and changing. Angie Stone and our special event team meet with the event sponsors and anyone involved in planning the event. And that leads up to the event. So if there's something that needs addressing within the planning process, then we get the, town staff involved that needs to help with that and make sure that they're compliant. So it's kind of starts at the top. Eileen starts, sending information out. Angie has been tasked with trying to help organize this and get it streamlined a little more. So I would say the final word. Did she leave? Oh, here you are. Yeah. Okay.
Hang on a second.
Yes.
Thank you for all of your work.
Thank you.
With special events and all of you who hold them here on the island. They make this a special place to live. And we're trying to, as April mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm Angie Stone for the record. We're trying to evolve this process and create more of an educational opportunity to help folks understand what the requirements are and help them be compliant. In terms of enforcement, we don't want to go that route. Right now, we are doing a whole lot to make sure that the way we are treating all of our events is equitable. So I've spent a lot of time out with noise meters and at events, just making sure that we're doing the same thing for everybody. And so I would welcome it if you have a specific scenario that you're thinking of, if we could talk specifically about that. But we're trying not to be the enforcement arm right now. We're trying to get the education going and help folks to be compliant and be a partner with them along the way to be sure that we're keeping the community safe and we're having good, safe events is really the aim of it all.
I have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Campbell.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angie.
I'm sorry, were you finished, Ms. Wright?
What?
Okay, thank you.
At these events, all vendors, do they need to display their business license?
I think that is in the code, but I can tell you that I have not been to a single event where I have seen them displayed. So again, we are looking at, on the front end of an application, we're looking at a list of vendors, so we have an idea of who's going to be there. I'm not going around the event with that list and checking them off. That may be something in the future, but again, we want to get the education out first and help folks comply and make this an easier process rather than the punitive arm first. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the next question is this: you said all vendors selling prepared food and beverages is required to collect the town's hospitality tax. Who is required to collect that tax from
The
that
vendor.
Yes, the vendor.
It's paid on their
Yeah, but
proceeds, right?
are they
Yeah.
giving that to the town afterwards?
So when you have your business license account, whether you're exempt from the tax or not, you would have the ability to pay the hospitality tax after the event at the business license office, or you could go online and do it.
Because if it's on a Saturday and that vendor's from Georgia, after that, he's leaving that same Saturday, so,
Yes, and then we work on enforcement behind the scenes.
okay. All right.
Okay, yes, Mr. Hintz.
If I wanted to do a pop-up, how long would it take to get everything that I needed so that I could be in business for the day?
As far as business licensing or just the entire
Just a
event?
small pop-up. I'm selling Christmas ornaments on December 15th, one day. It's not going to be 250 people unless I'm real lucky. How long would it take to get what I need from the town to be able to do that on the 15th?
I could speak to the business license requirements. If you live in town, it typically takes about 5 to 7 days to get your business license. It doesn't always take that long, but that's a pretty standard approach. If you live outside of town, you could actually come in and get your license that day because it doesn't require internal department reviews. So it could be about a week for the business licensing, and that would apply as well to the vendors. And then if there are additional requirements, the fire department works very quickly to try to get inspections or whatever might need to happen. So, we can expedite it and ask for someone if you were suddenly wanting to do something in a week's notice. We try to work with everyone because we just want you to have a successful event.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Akins. I think if there are some more questions, I would like to maybe assign someone from the task force to work with you and maybe come back and then we can What I'm hearing here is what's needed is education.
Yes.
We just all need to understand that there's not a process at this point for penalizing or citations or things like that, but we're certainly having some situations where I think that we're just not clear on how it works and what will happen if we don't have the proper permits and things in place. I'm sorry, Mr. Simmons, you had one more thing? You may try to move it along.
Yeah,
Sure.
and not to belabor the point at all. So it sounds to me like the whole thing about a business license is a matter of revenue, because if an event host has a license, that doesn't allow her to have an event unless.
Yes, the business license tax is in place to generate revenue for the town.
Yeah,
That is
so I mean,
correct.
and which is, I suppose that's what really complicates the whole issue, because it's a matter of revenue and it doesn't really, I mean, I guess to me, that's what complicates the whole thing, because, and why had not been an issue in the past is, it's been a smooth transition for most of the neighborhood pop-up shops. But
Yes.
I think when the neighborhood pop-up shops began to grow, someone said, well, it becomes a money issue, and money issues, government and money and local people, there's always a conflict.
Yes, I
And
understand.
that's what I really hear going on, because most times, as Ms. Green pointed out too, that, when a host says we're doing a pop-up shop, she very well may need to obtain all that she needs to obtain, but then it has come to the front or come to the table to be known that if you're doing such an event, then you have to follow these guidelines. Not that they haven't always been there, but I guess it's a matter of when an item, when functions grow into where it's more, now it's being noticed that these are going on, not that the rules haven't been there. And I guess one of the things I heard about this is by definition. You see, pop-up shop, most people said it was never really something that was defined by the town. And then it was using the definition was sort of revolving between what's a market, flea market or otherwise, versus a pop-up shop, because it was thought that the rules are different between a flea market, open market, or whatever, and a pop-up shop.
I can see how maybe that would be interpreted that way, especially you think flea market, you think very large event, it's over 250, and then suddenly you've got the applications, you have a large number of vendors. It's a big undertaking
But
for that event.
there's no difference in requirement for either
And then
event.
the smaller events have less
I mean, regardless of
requirements.
size, I'm just saying, if it's a market, is there a difference in requirement for what is known as a market or versus a pop-up shop?
Yeah, market, it falls in, a special event falls in all different, can be labeled as all sorts of things, but pop-up shops, pop-up markets, fall festivals, all the way to the concourse.
By definition for the town, when you have market as one of the items listed here, you have markets, then you have pop-up shops. I'm saying
Yes.
the requirement for either small or large, they're all the same.
Yes, it's, absolutely. It's
Okay.
consistent across the board.
Okay,
Sorry, I wasn't following.
yeah, okay.
I have one more follow-up question, if I may. There was a young lady who appeared before us who I think was being challenged by the rulers of pop-up shops, that she was having them. And then, for some reason, she was asked to stop or told not that she couldn't do it anymore. And we said that we would get with her and help her get through that process so that all the requirements necessary she'll be able to meet so she can continue to do business.
Yes, please send her my way. I'm happy to help her.
Okay? My question was going to be whether or not that particular young lady, her name was Felicia Young, has been able to continue to do her vending or pop-up shops where she was doing them at. Because that was the reason why you were here, I think, today, is to explain, to give us background on what pop-up shops and license and all that stuff means.
Yes, so she would need a business license to operate the pop-up shops.
So I guess just to jump in, And I guess it's okay to call names. I think you mentioned a name, but I recall,
It's on the record.
yeah, Tracy Young has come in several different times.
Tracy Young, right.
So have you all worked with Tracy? Have you come to any understanding about where, when, and how she can continue? Because she would have pop-up shops on property that I own. And it was simply a matter for me having the space, okay, fine. But I think it became a whole nother animal when this thing got to a point where it began to be noticed. It was then, is the zoning correct? Is it small, large, or otherwise? When there had been very successful items without any incident or otherwise, except I think the fact of dollars and cents, this comes to mind to me. When it becomes a money issue, then it's an issue for folks to have it. But I don't know where it becomes a happy median for our neighborhood and our community to host these kind of events, because if we remember, this started out as how the Gullah people could exhibit their crafts and otherwise. But then it became a business. It became, well, it's now becoming a business more so than you being able to exhibit your craft, wares, and otherwise. If you're gonna do that, then it qualifies you to have all of these other things now as we work toward being able to show our ware and our craft from the community. And I don't think no one wants to be non-compliant when you have these events, but we come right back full circle to the hurdles to get these things done, in our community.
Right.
If something's being hosted on the town's property somewhere or otherwise, I guess in the correct zoning, I guess that's okay. But there again, the point was, the focus was, how do we get these done within our communities where what we do circulate in that community? It almost gets to a point where, well, that's really not going to happen because however you do this is non-compliant. So the issue is that how do we find a compliant way to have these within our communities for our people, even if outsiders come to participate? We still lose in our community because we sometimes, we either in the wrong zone or there's no way to become compliant if you're not on town property somewhere where these things are allowed. That's the bigger picture, so.
Yeah. After sitting through the meeting and listening to your agenda items, I can certainly appreciate where you're coming from, and I would love to sit down and talk with any of you or your entire task force and try to find a solution for that. I think it's important to move forward.
Yeah.
And to create the bridge that you were talking about.
Yeah, and again, I think it's about education, to understand what we can do and what we can't do, and
Yeah.
if there's some ways to amend that or adjust it in some way, but I think we just need to understand how to do business here. What I would like to do is if I could have one of my task force colleagues that would want to work with you or Eileen to get that information, because I don't think we're going to solve that here today. We have questions, and then we're going to have some more questions. I'm sorry, Ms. Wright, you had something else as well?
I did have a question,
And,
but...
it's about 2:37.
Well, more of a comment
Yes.
than a question. And just to add to the fact about, and I know that we can't resolve all the issues about whether or not our community, well, the Native community can definitely have the pop-up shops without having to pay. So I just want to state that when you talk about the revenue from the business license and the things that they have to pay for and the taxes, it does come back to us through our ATAX. And so that money is for our nonprofit programs that we're putting on events and other things that's happening on the island that if we didn't have that money, we would not be able to do that. So it's not total full circle that the money all comes back to us, but some of it does. And I just wanted to say that because it's important, because the town do, give us that opportunity to apply for that funding through, with nonprofits to be able to get those kind of funds. And some of those funds do come from the licenses and pieces. So I just want to make that comment. I felt it is important.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I think it's important to understand from what I've seen in the presentation here today, the difference between a regular business and someone that just comes to do something for one day or something less than 3 days in a year. But again, that's the educational piece. And if there are some other special circumstances, then we need to understand that as well. So if I could, I can either do it now or speak to some of you offline if somebody wants to take this on to kind of work on this piece so we will understand it, we can present it to our community. Would that be you, Mr. Simmons, or you, Mr. Malik, or? I'm willing to help. Okay. Okay, Mr. Malik and Ms. Wright. Okay, great. They'll get with you and of course, Eileen and the appropriate people to get a better, more thorough understanding of it and see what we need to do. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angie. All right, moving on to the next item. I believe it is our meeting schedule. We have a proposed meeting schedule in your packet. And I'm guessing that most of these days, all these days are probably still on Mondays at 1 o'clock. You do notice there's been changes with some of the holidays falling, so the meetings might fall on a second Monday. But most of these are first Mondays of the month is our regular task force meeting, and this is a proposed schedule for 2023. What's that one? What's the issue with August?
2022.
Oh, okay. In our packet, the August meeting date has 2022, so I'm sure we can get that corrected.
We'll get that corrected.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Is your microphone on, please? Thank you.
To assure a quorum when we have our meetings, is it necessary that we have a monthly meeting? Or if we were to take, say, vacation time during June, July, and August, and we may not have a full quorum, is it possible that we can take off a month or two there, or no?
I think it's my understanding that we can always not have the meeting. I don't think I want to put it on the schedule as not having a meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to approve the schedule, and then if we want to adjust it from month to month, we can make that decision. One of the decisions that we've talked about already is that we possibly will not meet next month in December.
Right.
Because I think a lot of staff will be out of place. I know I'll be busy, and it'll be the holidays, so that's one of the things we consider. But it is on the general schedule. We can just make that month to month. All right. Other questions? Do we need to have a motion to approve this? Okay.
Yes, Chairman.
All right. If you guys have any other questions or comments, yes, sir, Mr. Hens.
As always, I'd love to have these meetings later in the day. Guess now's the time to make that request.
How do others feel about that? This time works pretty good for me, but Monday's a day that's kind of flexible. I'm not sure how much later in the day we would want to go.
What are you thinking, John?
I'd like, 3 to 5 would be my sweet spot.
Not sure how that would work for some of the rest of us. Other questions, comments?
If we're trying to get a fuller attendance from the public, is this time better served at 1 o'clock, or should we do it, alternate the times, maybe like going into the communities? I think that was something that we had done in the past, maybe, and have a couple of meetings in the community, and, we could alternate it there. Just.
Yeah, and again, I think that would be probably like a special meeting. I'm not sure if that's something that we want to put on our general schedule. Is that something that we should have? We can always adjust in a meeting if we want to have a special meeting, right? Yeah. In the community. I think the purpose of what we're trying to do here now is just to approve a calendar meeting. If you have any thoughts about 1 o'clock, I'm okay with the 1 o'clock time. I don't know what others think. I apologize, Mr. Hintz, if that doesn't work for you as well.
I mean, are we moving to accommodate the public, or are we moving just so we have an easier or better schedule for the task force? Which
Well, I think that there certainly needs to be a balance, but I would say that the task force is probably more important than the public. It wouldn't make any sense to have the public here if the task force is not here.
I guess that's my point, which thing are we trying to accomplish? I mean, 1 o'clock works for me. I could do 3, I suppose, but I mean, that's why I was asking, which thing are we trying to accomplish?
How do others feel?
I'm fine with one.
I'm flexible on Mondays. I'm fine as it is, but I can also go with a change.
Flexible.
You as well?
Monday or one is never good for me. So,
Three is probably not gonna be any better, right?
right,
Yeah. Right.
Monday period is not good for me, so I'm always out of that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I would propose we keep it at Mondays at 1 o'clock. And if we can maybe revisit this maybe halfway through the year, then we can try to see how that's working or if we can make some other adjustments. And again, we always have the ability to call a special meeting and make a change in our monthly meetings. Today, I'm asking that we approve the meeting schedule that's set before us for the year of 2023. And I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this meeting schedule.
So moved.
Mr. Malik has made a motion to approve it. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Simmons has seconded. Okay, all of those in favor? Ms. Shook by a show of raising your hand. Good. Ms. Green, are you in favor? Or are you not in favor, abstaining, or I just need to know? I'm sorry? In favor? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that completes the agenda that we have, and now the next thing we have is our staff report, I believe. Am I right? Yes. Okay, staff report. Delinquent tax, historic neighborhoods design studio, and the town open positions update, home safety repair, and the sewer connection program update, all by Missy Lewitt.
So the delinquent tax sale update, last month I indicated that we had been sharing the updates with you weekly up until the tax sale itself. There were 2 properties that were sold. They're again in the redemption period for a year plus a day. So I will no longer include the delinquent tax sale update on the agendas until we roll around to in advance of tax season in 2023. So right now, the only status update that I have, again, is the same that I shared with you last month, that there were 2 that were left on that list. The Historic Neighborhood Design Studio report was in your packet. Again, we have 44 design studio requests that we have reviewed. We've got 18 completed cases and 24 active cases that we're working on, helping people with design planning for their properties. As far as Town of Hilton had job openings, we currently still have the Senior Planner of Cultural and Historic Preservation. We have 911 Public Safety Telecommunicator Trainee, Principal Planner vacancy, temporary admin assistant in Revenue Services and Community Planning, as well as a transportation engineer. So those are also, they were included in your packet, and they're also available on our jobs board on our website. And now on home safety and repair and sewer connection, there was an update that was included in the packet. For home safety and repair, we've had 87 applications, 70 of them are approved. There are 12 applications that are still under review, and 5 of them were not approved. The sewer connection program activity update is that we have received 9 applications and 9 have been approved. That concludes our staff updates.
Do we happen to know who the delinquent tax, those 2 properties are?
It was shared with you confidentially.
Okay. Very good.
Okay.
All right. Anyone have any questions for Missy on any of this?
Yeah, I have one question, Mr. Regarding the senior planner, cultural, historic, and preservation vacancy. Do we have any candidates in the pipeline?
We do. We recently had a very good prospective candidate who applied last week. So we'll be working through an interview process.
Okay.
So, yes.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hens.
On the sewer connection, obviously we want everybody on the island connected to the sewer. So are we waiting for applications, or are we going out and requesting applications?
It was highly publicized. We had a really strong communications rollout. That program is administered through DeepWell. And so there are some who qualify for Project Safe, the program that's administered through DeepWell, and some who don't meet those requirements for Project Safe that then can apply for our program. Both programs are receiving a lot of activity. So there are additional connections being made through Project Safe in addition to the town sewer connection program.
Councilman Brown, you had a question for us or a comment?
Good meeting again, guys. It was almost on 2 hours here. Mr. Chairman, you asked a question about the property that is in danger of being lost and now on the redemption list. And I'm not sure, Missy, I know you said it's been shared confidentially. I guess I'm a little confused because I thought there was only one property. And I also know that that redemption list is a public record, isn't it? Yeah, so there's nothing confidential about it. I think it's important that this committee knows who the property is, okay? Just as we have made some ground today with the business license department and having more dialogue as to how that process works and that's educating people, I think the same is with the property taxes, okay? I have met with one family a couple of weeks ago that typically is on the delinquent tax list, and they had asked a question about what they can do with their property, and they were under misunderstanding that heirs property owners could not go through the design studio, okay? And which is totally untrue, okay, but that's just a misconception. So that's one example, and then today I've got a meeting at 4 o'clock with the one property owner that I know of that is on the redemption list. And that property is heirs also, and will have to go through a subdivision process, which will also require assistance from the town at the appropriate moment. So I just encourage that we share those families with the committee. There's a lot of work to engage with folks that don't have a full understanding of the process, okay? And that's incumbent of us on this committee and us in the community to continue those dialogues. So if we have some hesitancy between staff talking to the committee, then that's a disconnect. I think we need to share information that is publicly also available, number one. And secondly, I just encourage us to engage with those families where we can to educate on how they can improve the situation, because that's the whole purpose of this committee. That's the whole purpose of this effort. It goes right back to our mission statement. Those are my comments, sir. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Brown. And to his point, yes, I'm pretty sure that it is public information, as the tax sale was public information. But we should have that information shared from staff. I don't know if staff wants to share that now.
I don't have it in front of me right now.
Okay. That is fine. There are some of us who are in the community who are working with other efforts, as Councilman Brown mentioned. So I'm happy to share that information with what I know to any of the members of the task force, and we'll keep working in that direction. We're hoping that, just as we did with the pop-up shops item today, that as chairman, I can continue to maybe delegate some of these items for us to work on so that we're not trying to solve it in the meetings and try to get the length of our meetings down so they're a little bit more concise. And I won't say fruitful, but I think we have more questions at the meeting, and we should probably be doing a little bit more homework in between so that when we come to the meetings, it's really more of just an update and a little bit more productive for our public and for our task force, and maybe not so labor intensive for our staff. But I would like for us to work a little closer with the staff in between meetings. I would love to tell you that that is my own brilliant idea, but that is certainly something that Ms. Wright brought to my attention, and I'm glad to have her back on the task force to give me some ideas like that as well. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, you guys good? Ladies and gentlemen? Ladies and gentlemen of the public, thank you for being here. Our communications director, Ms. Grant, thank you for being here as well, and staff. If there's nothing else further, then this meeting is adjourned.